Elex is a game I think you should play. There, I've said the whole gist of the video in the first 3 seconds. Well, maybe like 5. But anyway, this way, if you have better things to do, you can go do them. If you want to hear a little more, maybe, such as why I think you should play it, for example, then sit tight for a few minutes, and I'll try to briefly explain. Now, I'm going to be honest here, you could probably just listen to this like a podcast at work if you wanted to, because I am regrettably not very talented when it comes to the visuals of these things. That isn't meant to be bait for compliments, I just mean it earnestly. I'm a YouTuber who believes in transparency and want you, the viewer or listener or whatever you are, to know that I am minimally skilled at editing, so there won't be any crazy effects or comedy, well maybe a little comedy, but I won't have much to keep perhaps the less attentive viewer engaged. I'm a little boring, I'm sorry. Further, I have no script for this. It's kind of just bullet points that I'm going to use to reference as I ramble about this little AA game called Elex. I'm not sure where that will take me, but hopefully I have enough in front of me to form at least a single cohesive thought? I guess we'll see. But let's start with the basics for now. Elex is a 2017 open-world RPG made by the creators of Gothic and Risen, Piranha Bites. Elex takes place in a post-apocalyptic world that sort of blends fantasy and science fiction and is in the middle of a faction and resource war. That war being over the game's titular mineral known as, surprise, Elex. Elex, the mineral, arrived on the planet whose name I won't say because it sounds too close to a word that would get me demonetized, via a meteor which destroyed most of the previous civilization. That civilization was essentially our own in terms of technology and seemed to, from the recordings you can find scattered throughout the world, have similar socio-political issues at the time of its destruction. The survivors of said meteor now live in the ruins, or I should say the descendants of those survivors, and many of them have either gone their own way into a new evolution of civilization or have stagnated in terms of their ideology. In this world, there are 4 major factions, those being the Bandits, the Clerics, the Berserkers, and the Albs, who I will briefly describe now. The Bandits are essentially an anarchist faction. They use Elex to make drugs that give them various enhancements, but they otherwise don't care too much about anything but making money. They're a little shallow in my experience, but people seem to like them, so I'm not going to say too much otherwise. The Clerics are a technologically advanced religious faction, having used Elex to rocket themselves past the previous civilization to something more advanced than ever. I mean, they have computers, for God's sake. They are, in my mind, what you could consider the strongest faction. They use Elex to give themselves a sort of techno-magic and are basically Jedi without the lightsabers. And while this all sounds great and good, I must warn you that before you rush off to join, consider this. Clerics worship information, almost to a fault, and they have a god named Kalan who embodies their hope for a better future. Now that might sound fine, but those who don't fit into this future or fight against it are brainwashed by people known as suggesters and turned into basically lobotomites to be used as slaves by the faction. Not great, but they do govern the only free city in the region, which is cool, and have an army of armored mechs and robots, and also build cool techno castles, so they aren't all bad, just a little bit complicated. The Berserkers are basically just Vikings who live at peace with nature and use Elex to make mana, which they then use to make magic. They use this magic to primarily fight against enemies or make the world green again, with the use of seeds they infuse with Elex called World Hearts. I feel that idealistically most people would probably choose the Berserkers, if not for the fact that they hate all technology to the point of having this zealot dislike of it where they destroy all technology they find and extract the Elex from it to turn it into mana, even though they clearly use Elex to enhance their weapons, which in itself is a form of technology if you think about it. And their reasoning for why they don't like technology is kind of hit or miss. It sounds a lot like they blame the meteor that hit the world on technology, which doesn't make any sense, of course. But anyway, I digress. The last faction, the Albs, is technically split in two between 2 groups that you can interact with, the Albs themselves and the Separatists. The Albs are the game's antagonists. They are a hyper-authoritarian and militaristic faction that broke off from the Clerics and consume Elex to give themselves incredible power at the cost of their humanity. Their skin is pale and lifeless, and they have almost no emotions as a result. This desire for Elex has become so ravenous that they wage war on all the other factions from their base, known as the Ice Palace, and build large structures called converters to extract residual Elex from people who are not like them. Oh, and they also do experiments on people and turn them into mutants to supplement their armies. Great guys all around, really. Separatists, on the other hand, are Albs, who are no longer under the influence of Elex and have regained their humanity, but live in constant danger due to the Albs hunting them, and other factions, understandably, not trusting them. Can't imagine why. There's probably more I could say on the factions, but I feel like that's a good basic gist. Anyway, in this chaotic world, you play as Jax, a former Alb commander who was on an important solo mission but was shot down in his plane thing, can't remember what they're called, and later betrayed by his own kind for failing his mission, which is kind of stupid. But anyway, this isn't really a spoiler. This is all shown within the first 5 minutes of the game. The game is pretty much after that just Jax seeking revenge against whoever shot him down and deciding if he's going to side with either the Albs, the Berserkers, the Clerics, or the Bandits. Now, I won't lie to you, I think Piranha Bites was going for a Geralt-type character in Jax, seeing as The Witcher 3 had just released 2 years before and to massive success. He talks the same, has the same demeanor, and is really more or less the same type of character, a hyper-skilled protagonist who many characters in the world already know, and sometimes fear. At times it works, but most of the time he, along with most of the other characters in the game, range from just okay to kind of awful. Writing has never really been Piranha Bytes' strong suit, and it seems like most of the characters in this game have way too much to say about even the most basic requests. They'll want you to go kill a couple raptors, and we'll talk to you with 45 paragraphs of text. That isn't always bad, and that isn't to say that all the quests or all the voice actors or all the dialogue are bad, because some of it is quite good. But if you do play the game, I would say be prepared for some pretty eye-rolling dialogue on occasion. It also doesn't help that there's maybe 10 character heads for the entire game. None of them are particularly attractive either, but then again, with how stressful this world is, I'd probably look like an ostrich's forehead too after a few months in it. So that's, again, a really basic overview of the story introduction, but I don't want to get too far into that because this is more about the adventure. Or at least my reasoning behind why you should play the game is more about the adventure than it is the story. But before we get to that, let's talk about the gameplay really fast. Gameplay-wise, you have all of your usual RPG suspects. You got skills, you got weapons, armor, magic, crafting, you know how it goes. If you've ever played any of the Gothic or Risen titles, or at least familiar with them, then you'll be familiar with how Elex operates, with maybe a few small changes. I won't explain that in too much detail here, but basically every level you get 10 points to put into attributes and a skill point to be used to build your character. It's both that simple and that complicated. You can be a ranged maniac who uses plasma guns and crafts amulets to sell for high profit, a techno wizard who uses a gravity hammer and makes potions out of Elex to pump up your stats to ridiculous numbers, or just a Viking with a bow who collects animal trophies to sell for money. The choice is yours, really. And that's right, I said choice. You remember that in games, especially in RPGs? Well, Elex is full of that beautiful golden word, and honestly, some of the quests are quite well done and branched together far more than you'd expect. I had some genuine moments of frustration and elation because of a choice I made a quest or maybe even 5 quests before, and if anything, to me, that's what an RPG is all about. If I'm not seeing the consequences of my own actions, then I'm not playing an RPG. It's just that simple. Now, with praise like that, some of you are probably running off to give this beautiful little Pandora's box of a game a try. But before you shell out that hard-earned and depreciated currency, I must caution you and say, Elex is rough and is very hard, at least at first. This is because the combat and even just the general mobility of the player character they're bad. They're really bad, to put it nicely. For a 2017 game made by a veteran developer, you'd think that they'd make something that didn't feel like it came out in 2005 and was made by someone who had never experienced gravity before. The player character is floaty, and you'll die just from being stuck in the terrain, and everything just kind of seems to work wrong. Enemies are hyper-aggressive, their ranged attacks seem to never miss, they run fast as the wind, and they don't run out of stamina. Oh, and they hit like trains. The lock-on system is bad, the jetpack is kind of cumbersome, the starter weapons are terrible, and you'll spend most of your early hours wishing you weren't playing this game. You can mitigate this by getting armor, but you have to join one of the factions to do so, which I should have known as a veteran of these games, but I didn't, and for the first 15 hours of my playthrough, I spent most of my time wishing I could throw myself off the nearest cliff and never reload again. But I persevered with my miner set and continued to die to this game's equivalent of a rad roach. What I mean to say is it's tough, and even though the world is wide and beautiful to explore, most players will spend those first few hours, like me, struggling just to make it to a new settlement and wonder why some dude, me, again, on YouTube recommended them this terrible experience in the first place. So here we are, now we come to the why. The reason I feel you should keep going after climbing through this mountain of pain, jank, and garbage. It's the satisfaction. Now, I've platinum Souls games, I've challenged myself with roguelites, and have turned up the difficulty in almost every game I play because it's just not enough. But few have given me quite the same level of overcoming challenge like Elex has. Now, to be fair, Piranha Bites games are known for this anyway. It's practically been baked in since the first Gothic game. And while Elex is far from their best total package, that would be Gothic 2, Fight Me, I think their formula for making a challenging experience for players to overcome and master is kind of unrivaled in Elex. You get to watch yourself rise from a literal worthless nothing who can't even dodge a chicken to a one-man tank, a god among mortals, destroying and burning people as you see fit. And God, it feels so good. Unlike other games, once you hit that pinnacle and get bored, this one, you feel like you deserve it. The journey there makes you happy and makes you want to keep going all the way until the finish, which admittedly is just whatever. But that reason and the inspired world, which blends science fiction and fantasy to create a setting unlike any I think you'll experience in most games, Those are why I recommend Elex. It is a truly unique experience. Is it rough around the edges? You're going to need a bandage because it's so rough, and probably a new keyboard if you're prone to frustration. Do enemies feel like health-inflated menaces meant to make you hate yourself? I got prescribed Zoloft after playing this game. Are the characters occasionally wooden and the story just okay? It's about as okay as Pinocchio eating a ham sandwich. But beneath all this surface-level muck, I promise you, is a true gem. A lotus blooming in the swamp, a diamond in the rough. And why? Because unlike so many games that cross my keyboard and mouse these days, that's right, I don't play with the controller, you casual, Elex has one thing that anyone who has played it can attest to: heart. And even though that's the worst member of Captain Planet's team, in a world and an industry riddled with uninspired open worlds, loot boxes, games as a service, and buggy, overpriced garbage, it feels good to give money to a developer who seems like they genuinely care about the medium of gaming, even if they aren't always the most skilled at realizing their vision. At least they care, and at least they try, and at least you can see the effort, even if sometimes it's a little frustrating. But that's it. That's my speech. It was a little longer than I thought it was going to be honest with you, but maybe got a little too real at times, but I hope, if nothing else, it maybe convinces you to give this game a try. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. I mean, I know I was. But that's going to be it for this one, so thank you all so much for watching. If you like this video, I have made others kind of similar to it in the past about Thief and Oblivion, but those games admittedly don't really require much persuasion to play. They're classics. But check them out if you have the time. Maybe slap a like on this video if you made it to the end, or leave a comment if you're up to it. You could say I suck, that's fine. It's up to you. But that's going to be it for me. I'm Olaf. This has been an impromptu video about Elex, and I appreciate you so much for taking the time to watch it. And I'll see you in the next one.